The system, it doesn't work. Are you surprised? You're probably not surprised I'm saying that at all. And you might be surprised, though, that I'm talking about Child Protective Services given my background. I've talked about it before. I came from a very abusive childhood, but I am not an advocate for Child Protective Services or SRS, Social and Rehabilitation Services, whatever you want to call it, whatever your state calls it, when social workers come and snatch your kid up. I'm not an advocate for that at all, even though when I grew up, there was no child services and I was subjected to some pretty heinous abuse on the part of my mother, and she got away with it scot-free. So it was like back then there was nothing and now there's too much. Now, people who are guilty seem to get away with it, and people who are innocent or did something innocent, like took a picture of their kid on the beach, have their kids taken away for 8 months and have to sit through litigation. It's a load of crap. But I just wanted to, from my own personal experiences, give two contrasting stories that kind of tie in with what I'm talking about here. Now, I've talked about this before. In 2003, with my first ex, I lost custody of my two boys, right? And then in 2007, I got them back because it was demonstrated that she was abusive and neglectful of the two children. The system took them from her and gave them back to me after 4 years. Now, right around 2005, my middle son, because I have three from two different relationships, my middle son, who was then the youngest, was still living with his mother because they just gave her custody. They didn't follow up on any of the evidence or anything. And I have a video that talks about in detail me getting my kids back, which is Custody Reversal 2007. But I'm picking him up for a visit. It's Friday night, and he's complaining. His chest. He's rubbing his chest, and his chest hurts. And I'm like, and it's evening. This is in the winter. I don't remember what month it was. What is wrong with your chest? And I pulled over because I had had so many games with this woman. I don't even know where to begin. What's wrong with your chest? Well, I'm not supposed to talk about it. All right, that's enough. Now I really need to know what's going on. Explain the problem. Show me your chest. And he pulls his shirt up, right? And it's got big blisters all over the center of it, like a patch of blisters right in the center of his chest, large ones. And I'm like, shit, that looks like second-degree burns. What happened to your chest? And he says, well, my mom gave me, and this happened just before I picked him up, gave him ramen fried noodles in a plate and with the water still in it, apparently, which, I don't know about you, I always made, if I ever gave the kids ramen fried, I put it in a bowl and I strained the water out. But she put it in the plate with the water and went to give it to him, and it tipped and poured onto his chest. And then he was told not to tell me so I wouldn't get mad. And I was like, oh my God, that is like ridiculous. The whole scenario sounds ridiculous. And I said, okay, we're going to the emergency room. I'm not taking you back to my place. And then have it blamed on me, right? So I went straight to the emergency room. This is my son. Just picked him up. I've got him for the weekend. He's got second-degree burns on his chest because, it's second degree when it's blistered out. So the water must have been still at a boiling temperature. And so they put him through. It didn't take too long, fortunately. I think it was Stormont Vale in Topeka. But they put him through. It didn't take too long because of his age. He was pretty young at the time. He would have been like, what, 7, I think? 7 years old. But the doctor examines it. The doctor says, you mind if I talk to him? And I was like, talk to him. I don't care. And he comes back and he says, that story is really fishy. Something's not right. And I'm like, okay. And he says, I think I might want to make a report on that. What do you think? And I told him, go ahead. It won't make any damn difference. Hmm. Snoopy. Snoopy as the World War I flying ace in his soft width camel. Maybe I should just hold it like this and talk so it looks like I'm Snoopy for the whole rest of the video. No, not a good idea. Thought I'd throw it out there. But he's like, what? And I was like, hey, listen, I've been through this. You know, there's a lot of games, a lot of mess. They don't listen to me. I'm the vindictive father. I'm the evil father trying to suppress this wholesome mother who's like never does anything wrong and is fighting me off all the time. It's like, go ahead and make a report. It will make a damn bit of difference. And he did. And I know some of you are probably sitting there thinking, oh, why didn't you just refuse to give the kid back? Because that's a dangerous situation. Try it. Try it, especially as a male. And I know that doesn't sound very nice, but especially as a male, try that and watch what happens. You do not go against the court order unless the court tells you to, or else you end up in jail for kidnapping, which I was not fit to do. Best case scenario was taking him to the hospital, contacting the case manager. Hey, he came to me with burns. I took him to the emergency room. They cleaned it up. They gave him a disinfectant. They gave me a prescription to care for it, bandaged it up. They put a large bandage over it, told me to keep it dry, you know, or whatever. And so that's how it went. Talked to the case manager, and she said that go ahead and just bring him back on Sunday night, because I managed to get a hold of her, surprisingly. Bring him back Sunday night, no surprise. There was a report filed, and the report didn't do any good. I got a phone call on this report that said basically, hey, there's a report. We want you to know that there's been an SRS child endangerment report filed. We can't tell you who it was. And of course, I knew who it was. It came from the hospital. You hear that yowling in the background. That's Romeo making noise because he knows I'm on the other side of the door. I don't know if you can hear that over the speaker. But that, yeah, a report's been filed, so we're doing an investigation, and we contacted you. And they never contacted me or questioned me again. They just informed me that there was something filed. And they contacted the case manager. Now that's Romeo knocking on the door. But they contacted the case manager, and the case manager got back to me to let me know that they had contacted them. And never heard anything about it again. Got a notice in the mail that said findings unsubstantiated. Unsubstantiated, because they have to inform me of whatever findings. Unsubstantiated. Now, jumping ahead, this is to after 2007, when I had custody. When custody was reversed, they found out there was a lot of mess going on. The case management division in the Shawnee County Courthouse got in trouble for basically, and I talk about this in the video, Custody Reversal 2007, that they never followed up on their investigation. They admitted it in open court because the judge was furious. She was like, why the hell hasn't this been up before me before? And they're like, well, Your Honor, we never actually went to the house and we never actually followed up on the complaints. We assumed it was hearsay. Isn't that nice? That's how case management handles things. It's just a vindictive father. So screw him. He's lying. The reports from the school are lies too, I guess, and the reports from the hospital are lies too, I guess, and the pediatrician and everybody else. I'm just making it up. I'm influencing them all to make it up on my behalf. That's a load of shit. So after I had custody, there was another incident. He came to me with a bruise. It was on his shin. I want to say he had a bruise on his shin. It was a big one. And, you know, you don't think too much of it because kids get bruised. It just happens. I just want to throw this out there for any social workers who might be watching. Kids get bruised. It happens. So he comes and he's got a bruise on his shin. And then a few days later, there's another report. I get 3 social workers at my door. 3. wanting to know about the bruise on his shin that after he went to his mother for a visit, when he came back, a report was filed. And they wanted to interview him. They wanted to interview me. He says that he slipped while carrying a laundry basket up the stairs in my house. And I don't know if that's true or not. I really don't know when he got the bruise, to be honest. He was wearing pants most of the time. And so suddenly a bruise appears. How'd this happen? I don't know. Whatever. The typical kid answer, I don't know. Whenever the bruise actually occurred that instant, I wasn't aware of. If it happened outside at his mother's, in my house, I didn't know about it until I actually saw it. So he says he slipped. So then they want to take a picture of the stairs. Then they want to take a picture of him standing on the stairs. Then they want to take a picture of him standing on the stairs holding the laundry basket. And I'm like, you people, what the hell are you doing? Did you all do this when there were reports made about abuse on him when he was living with his mother? Absolutely not. Now, what good did come out of that, actually, was that the case manager, no, it wasn't this, it was the next report. There was another report that happened at school. And he said, I quote this too, I was told to say that I slipped on the stairs. That's what he told the social worker. Another incident a few weeks later with a bruise on his back. And the school social worker called me and she said, listen, this doesn't sound right at all. I'm calling you just to let you know. He came in and he says he has a bruise on his back and that he's supposed to make sure that we know that his older brother did it. And I'm like, I don't know if he has a bruise on his back. I don't know if his older brother did it or not. And I asked his older brother and he's like, no, I didn't do anything to him. I don't remember him having a bruise on his back. And I know somebody out there is going to be mad at me that I'm not like doing a total body check on the kid every day. But at this point, he's like 10 years old. You don't just like do a strip search on your kid all the time. If there's a problem, bring it to me and I'll deal with it. But if he had a bruise on his back, I didn't even know if he did. And it turns out he had a small mark on his shoulder that was about that big and no reasonable explanation where it came from. And he said, my mother told me to say that Toby stood on my back. And I'm like, that's crazy. Did he do that? No, but that's what I was told to say. So how'd you get the bruise? I don't know. That's just pure manipulation. But at that point, the case manager said, well, I put an order out that any report can no longer be filed directly to SRS or Child Protective. It has to come through this office first, and then I will let them know whether or not they should bother to follow up on it, which is probably what was done to me back in 2003, 2004, 2005, when, before I got custody back, where somebody in the court just decided that any report that was made wasn't worth looking at and intercepted it. And then you get all these unsubstantiated reports. And as it turns out, investigating that further, I had something to the tune of like 28 reports filed against me by her. All unsubstantiated. But then she was the one who was abusing and neglecting the kids. And I think I have a video up about, do I still have it up? I had a video about that also, because it was actually video footage, or not video footage, photographs of the inside of the house taken by the oldest son that demonstrated that something was wrong in the home. He went around and he took pictures all throughout the house and put it on discs. I'm sure I've talked about this before. Or rather, he gave me the digital camera and I put it all on discs. And I went around and I distributed it to all of the interested parties, which was SRS, Child Protective, the farm, which is a social worker agency, the courthouse, the Family Services and Guidance Center, 2 different divisions that he was going to, There's a lot of people. A lot of people were watching and nobody was doing anything. And it was the worker, the social worker from Family Services and Guidance Center who would drive out to the house to pick him up and talk to him once a week for an hour that actually looked at the disc, because it was either thrown away or sat around collecting dust, because she watched it and she looked at the images, feces on the floor, hoarder piles of like clothes and stuff, things piled all the way up to the window frames in the house of just trash and boxes, no hot water, just nothing in the cabinets. They were living like animals. And like I said, when that disc got around, circulated, and they were forced to go back to court because she insisted, she contacted the case manager and said, "Did you get a disc?" And he's like, "Oh yeah, I got that." "Did you watch it?" "Nah, I couldn't be bothered." "You need to look at it right now because I'm filing charges." And he did, and that's how we got back into court. And then the judge went nuts all over the case management division and a bunch of the other social workers for not doing their jobs. Why wasn't this investigated? Well, we admit we've never actually been in her home, and we've never actually followed up on any of the investigations or any of the complaints. But I was the bad one. So, and, I'm not perfect. I'm not without fault. I'm not without fault. We all do the best that we can, but I never abused my kids. I never neglected them. They were never hungry. I never had to hear stories from them like the stories that I hear now, you know, that that the kids are older, or especially my middle son is older, and he can talk about the things that they went through, having to eat raw potatoes. Him and his brother going to the supermarket and stealing cans of like green beans and stuff and eating it out of the can in like the parking lot. And just horror stories, stuff that I had no idea how bad it was. And they were afraid to talk. They wouldn't talk to anybody. But the system was all up in it and did absolutely nothing. But they sure did chase me around like I was a fox on a hunting trail. It was absolutely disgusting. Because I have three from two different relationships. My middle son, who was then the youngest, was still living with his mother because they just gave her custody. They didn't follow up on any of the evidence or anything. And I have a video that talks about in detail me getting my kids back, which is custody reversal 2007. But I'm picking them up for a visit. The system, it doesn't work. Are you surprised? You're probably not surprised I'm saying that at all. And you might be surprised, though, that I'm talking about Child Protective Services, given my background. I've talked about it before. I came from a very abusive childhood, but I am not an advocate for Child Protective Services or SRS. Guilty seem to get away with it, and people who are innocent or did something innocent, like took a picture of their kid on the beach, have their kids taken away for 8 months and have to sit through litigation. It's a load of crap. But I just wanted to, from my own personal experiences, give two contrasting stories that kind of tie in with what I'm talking about here. Now, I've talked about this before. In 2003, with my first ex, I lost custody of my two boys, right? And then in 2007, I got them back because it was demonstrated that she was abusive and neglectful of the two children. The system took them from her and gave them back to me after 4 years. Now, right around 2005, my middle son, social and rehabilitation services, whatever you want to call it, whatever your state calls it, when social workers come and snatch your kid up. I'm not an advocate for that at all, even though when I grew up, there was no child services and I was subjected to some pretty heinous abuse on the part of my mother, and she got away with it scot-free. So it was like back then there was nothing and now there's too much. Now, people who are